Welcome back, guys, to the Uncommon Advisor podcast. This is episode 2, titled AI Won't Save You, but We Might. So let's kick off this conversation. Look, AI is quite a broad topic, and we want to do 2 very specific conversation sort of pieces and 2 sort of avenues that we want to go down. And firstly, it's how we're using AI. And then the second one is how our clients are looking to leverage AI as well, and how all of this all fits together and how we can help, and what we're learning at the same time with this sort of technology being absolutely sort of revolutionary, but also instrumental in our business as well, and how it's becoming instrumental in other businesses and other organizations. So Avneet, I'll start off with you. What are you mentioned earlier, like this is the 2 avenues that we wanted to talk about. So in either order, let's take our audience on a little bit of a journey in terms of the situation with AI right now and how us as consultants, as a partnership, and what's our sort of relationship to it.
Yeah, sure. So without sounding too corporate, technology-enabled change has always been a theme over the last 15 or 20 years, particularly in consulting. So I've worked in many different roles, like we talked about in the last episode, and there's been different flavors of how you leverage automation, whether that's outsourcing customer service centers, using technology to replace people, and quite frankly, just bringing the level of manual effort down. So it's not a new concept. AI in itself it's a decade old, but it's the realization now that it's a very powerful tool that's able to make us go faster. Like the internet is not yet fully understood in terms of its capability and what it's going to touch, but also is publicly available. And that combination creates significant disruption, particularly in, like, I'm a dad, I've got an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old, and they're going to grow up with AI. So there's a lot of, the next generation is AI native, right? Like in my life so far, we've had the internet, you've had technology-led transformation, and now you've got AI-driven change. And it's about trying to understand its capabilities, put good governance around it, but also maximize its capabilities whilst retaining our human nature, intelligence, and social interactions.
Cool. So recently, so I asked both of you guys, because I know we were talking in private around how certain recent engagements that you've both had,
Yeah.
It was very obvious what the take and the use and the leverage of AI was. So if you want to talk about a recent experience that you had.
Yeah, sure. So I did a board engagement piece. Quite frankly, I didn't use AI. The reason I didn't was quite pronounced. 1, because it's a board engagement. 2, because as an independent consultant, it wasn't the right thing to do because it was a confidential piece on growth, scaling for the future, and there's lots of sensitivity around the commercial aspects of that and the considerations behind why you'd employ a consultant to come in and do that sort of work for you, because it's confusing. So it's confusing. There's a lot of trends to uncover. There's a lot of people engagement. Can AI actually do any of that effectively? In reality, at the moment, no. Maybe in the future there is an enablement, but there's not the governance yet and the capability within the tools that are being built for that. And so for me, we can come on to this topic later, but yes, we're an AI-enabled business, and we've seen a lot of degree of success of winning clients through automating our processes. But on a client engagement, I've been reticent to use it because the primary phase that I think we're all in running this business is about building relationships. And yes, there's definite room for it to help us go faster, but that needs to be capped to internal use only at the moment for us. So.
Yeah. So it sounds like we're saying, yes, use AI where it's applicable to help us with efficiency. And, if we can automate certain parts of it, absolutely we should. And obviously, if it is a governance issue, then we should kind of hold fire a little bit. And I think that's a very important thing to say, because I think the nuance is quite necessary now with AI. I don't think you can just, it's not not everything, if AI is a hammer, not everything is a nail. And that kind of leads me on to asking Steve. So recently, you had a very specific, you're part of a conversation with one of your quite substantial, long-standing clients, a global firm. What was their approach?
It's a fascinating observation. So this is a high-tech company.
Yeah.
They are very aware of all the change that's happening in the high-tech world, whether it's Meta laying off thousands of jobs or whatever it might be because of how AI is bringing fast change to that. And it's interesting that their kind of new slogan is basically, we're going to AI the shit out of everything. It's kind of, and that is almost everywhere. And it's starting to be their first port of call from a perspective of, I've got a problem, what does AI say? And actually, that doesn't sit very comfortably with me, if I was to be brutally honest. And I'll give you a silly example, or if you like, a less kind of strategic example. We deliver a lot of training as part of the solutions we do. We deliver a lot of technical training in the world of continuous improvement and problem solving. And some of our continuous improvement techniques are quite analytically heavy. And we've used Excel and specialist software for many, many years to do the heavy lifting. And a lot of our students now are kind of going, well, actually, why don't I just put the data into AI and get AI to draw me the graphs, the charts, to tell me what these charts are saying? And I think that's amazing. I think that's incredibly powerful. But you've got to understand, I guess, where this technology is getting its answers from. Because if enough people say the world is flat, AI will tell you the world is flat. Yep. And I am seeing, when I put in analytical information and ask AI to run a piece of analysis, that they don't always give you the right answer. And if we're making big strategic decisions about our business and about the future of our business, we need to make sure our data is spot on and not being manipulated by groupthink, for want of a better word. So I think we have to be a little bit careful. I also think it is an amazing, amazing tool, and I'm blown away by it. It's one of those things where a lot of our clients build the infrastructure that are basically building the microchips of the future, and they're all kind of saying, look, we need to be right at the head of the game here. We need AI at the center of our world, because actually, if we don't, somebody else is going to come along and actually become more competitive, steal our clients, steal our customers. So there's a lot of a kind of fear, but also a huge amount of opportunity tied up in this world as well. I just want to make sure that we don't lose our intelligence as we move to an artificial intelligent world. I think that would be my kind of thought initially.
No, well said, well said. Yeah, it just sounds like, just with any sort of new technology, you'll have a camp that's just like, use the crap out of it and, try and replace as many humans as you can. And the other side is, do not touch it with a barge pole. Obviously, we're finding with anyone that we're either having conversations with or who we're, engaging in some sort of business relationship in, there is a level of leveraging it. But also what we're finding is you have to have a nuanced approach. You have to have a conscious approach to it. And you don't really want to abdicate your power to a tool that we don't really fully comprehensively know what its capabilities are, let alone its limitations. I think that's very important. And then what I'm noticing in the feel that I'm getting from this conversation is an emergent conversation, because even us, three of us, we're sort of peeling back the layers and we're kind of going on a journey in real time with this whole thing. So we don't really have a definitive take on this. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think we're willing to put ourselves, into the gladiator pit in all of this to really find out what is useful and what isn't. But that, and with the drawing on our perspectives in, working with technology, implementing technology, but also the relationship that humans have with technology, and making sure that there is a balance between the human aspect and the technological aspect. So is there anything you guys want to say to that, what I've just shared?
I was going to add to that in the sense of, how the use of AI has changed so quickly. In the sense of a year ago, I was at a conference, and it was an academic conference, and they were talking about how universities were developing training material using AI. And it was a very simple task, write me a course about X type of thing. And then literally, a few months later, we're using AI to take the bias out of exam marking. So there was an interesting article that came out recently where kind of an education establishment is taking the marking away from the teachers because there's an inherent bias, because the teacher knows the student. And so when they're marking their work, depending on the relationship they have, well, of course, AI can be set up so there is no bias. And that allows the teacher to do the clever bit of giving the feedback and developing the child further. So I think there's this idea as well that actually our interpretation and our application of it is changing at an incredible pace.
Yeah, I think, and that's also a discussion on the relative size and age of the establishment or the user, right? So if we talk about establishments, my wife works at a university. There's a lot of checks and balances around how students are using AI to submit their their coursework. In reality, but there is an acceptance that it's out there and it's being used in quite a lot of depth. If you were speaking maybe 18 months ago, it was a more emergent, less reliable technology. But people are building startups off the back of it. We, with our consultancy company, our AI enabled a lot of the tenders we've submitted have made us inherently faster and able to deliver better content. But it's because we've got years of experience and knowledge. So there is, as you say, this element of having enough knowledge to use the tools whilst realizing it's a tool and not an outcome driven exercise. Yes, it will make you faster. Yes, you'll probably get a wider 360-degree angle of your thought process to validate data, but it does still need to be treated with some form of caution because, as you say, you don't know where the data's coming from. Yes, it's pulling data from the internet. It's still in, very much in child mode. And if you're a larger corporate organization, you'll be looking at the corporate governance behind using such tools. Whereas if you're a startup, you're looking at it going, this is going to make me faster. Inherently, there's a need for less people. So it's about finding balance, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that kind of leads me on nicely on how just to talk a little bit more about, how we use it. So, full transparency, like Stephen and me are well versed in writing bids. I was not. And, part of my sort of initial, as we're kind of gearing up to go out to market and start sort of building the relationship, start sort of, putting proposals forward. What I did was part of the bid writing process that we did for these public contracts, these invitations to tender, is to use AI to kind of synthesize all of our expertise and perspectives, and even as far as to go as our bit of our thought leadership and our our takes on innovation in terms of delivering operational excellence to delivering industry standard training around project management, agile, transformational values-based leadership. What I did was in the early stages of us kind of building our pipeline is to synthesize all of that information. And like we said, what we've come to learn and what we're always refining is that we're not completely handing over to AI to do any of the heavy lifting. It's very good and it's fast and it's efficient, especially with the level of like context windows that you have now, that it can synthesize a lot of information at any given time, but you still have to do a lot of navigation and guide it best way forward. So that's a big part of our sort of bid writing and proposal writing process, which, traditionally you would say only last few weeks at a time in a normal sort of environment.
In a environment where it was primarily human effort and human intelligence driven, you need a lot of perspectives from different people depending on what you're bidding on. So you need, my historical roles as consultant / program manager. You'd be leading the input. Some of the inputs, if it's a software project, would come from a developer. Some of it would come from an architect. Some of it would come from me, having run a sector project before. And then there's a commercial architecture of the bid itself, of, breaking down number of days, rates, etc., etc. That is becoming faster. You are needing less people to input, but at the same time, it's about the quality of the output coming from AI. And that's why I meant, like, it will give you option A, option B, option C, but it's very immature in how. So I'm having to still architect what the project might look like, who's going to be involved, what their capability is, and then it's spitting out numbers. So that is definitely the bit that's going faster, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? In the sense of we're asking AI to do these repetitive tasks,
Yeah.
and organizations are asking them to do it, but we're having to put in place 100% inspection because we
Correct,
don't
yeah.
quite trust the output. And I think that what will be interesting over the next few weeks, months, years, as these models get bigger and bigger, is whether or not we can start easing back a little bit on the sampling of, if you like, quality control and inspection. Because at the moment, they're turning the bit around really quickly, but we still have to read through every single one. We'd never submit it
No.
blank. And likewise, we've got clients that are using AI to process documentation or to summarize kind of long articles or documents, or whatever it might be. But then we're still kind of going over the work. It's almost like, you've got a child and you're kind of watching
Yeah.
them do their homework, aren't you? Because you're not 100% sure. So I think it's fascinating that actually we're using it to speed it up. I think the next step of speed will come from the fact that we start to trust the output. And as we trust
Yeah.
the output and that inspection starts to come away, and we're only inspecting maybe half or 10% or 1% of the output. But it's interesting at the moment we are, and everybody's doing this, they 100% inspect AI at the minute, which I think is quite interesting.
I think there's also an element of the technology is improving at quite large incremental rates of improvement. So, you've got pro memberships, you've got changes in the algorithms, you've got multiple new AI tools out there, everything from design through to numeric and verbal engagement now in the tools that wasn't there before. But I don't think, Steve, like, it took a long time to move from dial-up to cable, right? Like, and the reality is the technology was unreliable and has some level of dependency. Yes, we're, as a new technology or as a carve out of some of the existing technology you already have, there's definitely improvements in that. There's not as much physical infrastructure, data centers, that are cooled. It's not as loaded as some of the previous tech that has been developed. But at the same time, I think the more we engage with AI, the more knowledge we give it, the quicker it will become in giving good output. But I think if we look at any one of the public sector tenders, I spend more time with you reviewing it and doing 5 quality gates because I'm cautious. I don't think that behavior is going away in the next year, maybe 2 at least.
Absolutely, because I think, we're probably going to speak more to this as this sort of conversation goes on. It's, I love using AI to kind of speed up things, but I also like it primarily because there's, as self-proclaimed experts, you have a lot of, you have a lot of, you don't just have a CV, but you have nuance understandings. You have what I would call tribal knowledge of your industry, which no other person has. And trying to put that on like one CV is like impossible, especially when you're writing proposals. But you also, as Steve was saying, a lot of this stuff is repetitive. But with AI, you can create MD files, you can create skill files, you can create all of these things where you can get AI and even automate it to the point where agents are doing something. So we recently explored using agents to kind of do an initial first run of a proposal, and overall it was really successful. But then the other task that that I have, and that's, I think it's going to be very common, is not just the inspection part, but also it's in relation to the inspection part, but is the refinement of the prompting, of the writing the agent instructions. Is it, taking on board everything that you needed to take on board to make the judgment calls, to write, answer the questions, and to kind of create the output, in this case, a proposal.
And at the moment, just to come in and add something to that, Meehir, at the moment, there's real skill needed to write those prompts. You
Yeah.
can't just wing it. You can't just make it up.
Cut. Who's that?
Not mine. Right, we might want to go back and
Yeah.
do that questioning.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
That's the first one we've had, which is
Ooh, is that a phone call or alarm? Oh, okay. Really popular, mate.
it's nice to be wanted.
Yeah.
I forgot what we were talking about. What were we talking about?
Yeah, you give me a second. Just like, quick reminder.
Oh, where are we going from?
Yes. Okay.
Is the wires in front of the camera? Is that all right?
No, that's fine. It's not in front of the lens. It's fine.
Okay, let's go.
And action. So, Steve, you were talking about how it takes real skill for, writing these prompts and prompt engineering, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fascinating thing for me at the moment is it's such a skill. You can't just wing it. You can't just open up Copilot or ChatGTP or whichever model you're using and just type in some random stuff. You've really got to it's a real skill. It's a real talent to be able to write these prompts. And I think what's interesting is one of the questions we're often asked is actually if we're going to maybe analyze some data or look at for a particular trend, how do we kind of write a prompt in such a way that we get some sort of meaningful answer back? So we might want the answer written in a way that is going to be shared with, let's say, a senior manager, or it might be written in a way that's going to be shared with an R&D scientist, or it might be shared with an administrator. And almost you want the output to be presented back to you in those formats. And as a consultant, the natural skill that we've got is that we can take complex situations and we can change them and communicate them back to the audience at different audience levels.
Yeah.
ChatGTP or whatever it is won't do that automatically. You've got to write the prompt to say, actually, this is my audience, this is who we... And there's real skill in that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I was coming from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The thing about AI, it's very literal, so it doesn't actually understand nuance unless you absolutely sort of spell it out for it. And there's nothing wrong in that inherently, but in and of itself, it is, an engineering overhead you would have in your business, and that's something that, because we have the gains from the efficiency of getting proposals out, it leaves us plenty of room to actually work on this part and actually refine our processes. And we sincerely hope that we can take that wisdom that we learn and share that with our clients. And we've shared several big takes on AI at the moment, but I think because I have a general sort of love for technology and whatever, like I'm noticing. Before it was about prompt engineering, and it still is about prompt engineering, but now you can tell AI, write me the best prompt. So you don't even have to really learn prompt engineering like that anymore as much as we did in 2-3 years ago. Now it's really becoming about, agents and how they support, automating all the repetitive tasks.
Yep.
And that's kind of what I believe is going to be from a business standpoint, one of the most important paths that we will be going down and probably helping our clients with, very, very soon.
So I think it's double layered, right? So so there's an aspect of agents doing automation, but that's like a here and now. The reality is there's integration happening. For example, if I look at my property business with Booking.com and Airbnb, and you being able to scan and look for apartments in X location for X duration without even logging on to those apps. So there's an element of integration, and that opens up a lot of exciting opportunities around more democratization of available services, which is great. And then if you look at that against, for example, the general capability to start reducing overhead, they're quite stark, right? Like, so one is around increased level of service, increased level of democratization. The other is around pure cost cutting, right? And it's, as advisors, it's about recognizing what the technology is going to be capable of doing. That is where we will just continue to be able to advise our clients on the safest way and the most pragmatic way to implement solutions. And we've talked about the different tools. You've got Canva, you've got slide producing tools, and at the moment it's very distributed estate. That's also going to change. It's going to become more centralized. So I think there's a huge amount of technological change and behavioral change still to come. So it's quite an exciting time to be an advisor. It's also an exciting time to be an AI-enabled business. I think, Steve, we mentioned larger corporate clients. Whilst it's exciting, it's also quite, it needs to be controlled, and any use of it needs to be executed with right level of governance and also the right decision making behind that as well. So.
One of the challenges, of course, is that corporations are often regarded as immovable tankers, aren't they? In the sense that they're very slow to respond. And it's interesting, it will be interesting to see and to observe which corporations are still doing what they're doing today in 5 years' time, because actually the world is moving under their feet. And actually there is something there about small organizations being more agile, being more flexible, being more responsive. There are less people in the organization, so in essence, the actual interactions between people and the AI are obviously a lot smaller,
Yes.
and corporations are often obsessed with control. It's a command and control type history that's built these big corporations. Even the ones we see as high-tech, futuristic organizations are still built on traditional command and control frameworks, which AI will be turning on its head, as actually suddenly the power comes to the individual now, because actually the entire world is in that search bar for them. So it is fascinating.
Before we move on to the next bit, now, Steve, keep the mic for a second. So I just want to ask you a question specifically around, obviously, your expertise lies in operational excellence. Being the founder of ISSP, I'm curious to know, like, what are the type of conversations you're having, or what are the thought processes you're having around AI when it comes to actually training, and where AI falls into actually getting people maybe even upskilled in this area in relation to the training you provide?
There are so many angles to take this. We could do 100 podcasts on this, and it's just one little part of our world if you think about it. But one of the observations that obviously you're seeing all the time, you see it in the news, is students using AI to get through exams, get through assessments and all the rest of it. And I think one of the things that this will do for our institute, so part of what we do is a certification, so we certify continuous improvement professionals and operational excellence professionals. Historically, those certifications have often been based on coursework, and they've been often based on exams. We assess apprentices as part of what we do. And if you look at some of the apprenticeship standards, most of them are built around project work and portfolios and exams. And I think actually we're going to need to move away from that, because that's so easily manipulated by AI, into a field of something which is actually going to cost more, let's be honest, which I would call the professional discussion. So that would be me assessing your competency, assessing your knowledge, skills, and behaviors based on a discussion. And in that environment, you're standing almost by your wits and by your personality and by ability. But actually, I'm assessing you then. I'm not assessing your ability to use AI to generate an output. So I think there is that whole world there of assessment that's going to be a really interesting world to explore in the coming years. And it'll be interesting to see how universities, training providers move to a way of, well, how are we going to measure competency in a world of AI? And then on the flip side, the delivery of material. So why would you pay to have somebody stand in front of you anymore and deliver a training course? So what value is that trainer actually delivering? So is it all about facilitating the debate, the discussion, bringing different side conversations into a bigger picture, linking things together. Maybe that is where the added value comes from a kind of training side of things. Because it's so easy to generate material, but actually, what's the real value we bring to that classroom, that training environment? And then with regards to this series of podcasts, you take it a step up and go beyond, outside of the training room, from a consultancy perspective. How do we add value as that advisor?
And I think that's the interesting part, right? So what AI cannot replace is real lived experience. It can't replace that. So when you talk about assessments and assessing someone, you'll have a relative judgment of how, where are they in their either educational or career standpoint, what sort of qualification are they pitching for, have they got the experience, or sometimes have they got the ability to patch the knowledge together to pass that bar. Versus in consulting, there's the conversation we had about like where do you apply it, but also frankly, like we've been asked to train people on AI awareness. So there are individuals that they're better with tools or in the trades or in a career or line of work that does not involve AI, and it's about educating them.
Yeah.
So this is really the infancy, and like you say, Steve, we can take it in quite a few directions, but I think the exciting thing is it will raise the level of human capability, but it will also change how we work.
Yeah, and if it's not clear to our audience, I'll make it a little bit clear. So in addition to our consultancy work, we also provide industry standard training, Six Sigma. We provide training in project management with digital and digital skills. So amongst many other sort of training around leadership and management training and other professional courses with certification. But in relation to AI, it's becoming like a skill. Not so long ago, you would have an advertisement that would have maybe some senior members of society learning how to use the PC.
Yeah.
AI is pretty much the same thing because it's going to be so integral to our life just as much as electricity has been, as the internet has been, and it's moving at a rate that I think everyone is kind of struggling to keep up with. But saying that, we've used I've used the word nuance quite a bit in this conversation when it comes to AI. So, and I want to kind of bring it back full circle in this final part of this episode is, why do you still need an advisor if you have the likes of, your Claudes, your ChatGPTs, your Geminis, and your ability to kind of do, unlimited amounts of research and prompting and things like that? Why do you still need an advisor?
So maybe if I answer that question first and then hand over to Steve to talk about his perspective. So my last assignment, look at a department that had been growing through sales of a top-rated set of items, required a forward plan for sustaining growth, required understanding who the people were behind the strategy, the people plan itself, the process, the technology. That is a huge amount of complexity. We've just described in the short time that we had, about half an hour, that AI is just about able to rationalize numbers. So it cannot be a physical presence in an office. It cannot face off to an executive stakeholder with the relative level of intelligence and nuance of that person. It cannot understand yet multimodal, multi-dimensional, complex problems. And it doesn't have the lived experiences. I think I've given like 6 reasons just there in itself, right? But it is a very powerful tool to break out thoughts, bring structure, validate an approach, which effectively makes an employee or an advisor both infinitely more effective. But that's just a summary of like where we are maturity-wise. If we run this podcast in 18 months, you're going to see some new functionality. We're already seeing drawings come out. We're already seeing like you say, skills matrices come out. You're seeing design work come out. There's the capability is exponentially growing at a rate of knots, right? And then we struggle to keep up, as you said, but two, we don't actually know what the nth capability is and when you're going to move from a LLM to the next fancy model and what that model is going to be able to do. But what we do know is we've been down this path before with technology. You need humans to guide, steer, engage, and intercept all of those to get it right.
And that's pretty comprehensive. You've not left me a lot less. I think there's a few things that I would chip in. The first one is I've been in the game long enough, and you guys will have seen this as well, that there are fads that come and go in our world. In our respective industries, in our respective sectors, there are fashionable things to do. This isn't one of them. This is not something that's going to go away. So that would be the first thing I would say. That actually this isn't something you can just stick your head in the sand and hope in a year's time we're talking about something else. And the second thing I would kind of add into this would be very much one of what it can't do. I'm very careful to say that it can't do, because I think you're right. In 18 months' time, I might be looking back saying, well, it can't do this. And thinking, well, actually it can. But one of the things that at the moment it can't be is it can't be that friend next to you. And what I mean by that is a lot of the managers and leaders that we work with, that we see every day, are high-performing individuals. They are the kind of leaders of big organizations, small organizations, but they have got to that position based on lots of things, talent, drive, whatever the characteristics are. Yeah. But every one of them would admit, maybe not publicly, but every one of them would admit it's a lonely existence in that position, yeah? And I think one of the things that everybody needs is that human friend. And we talked in the last podcast about a critical friend. And I don't think at the moment AI can replace that human friendship that a special advisor which we would try and bring to the equation. And I'm not saying it'll never do that, but I think at the moment, the real reason is that it can be quite lonely at the top. It can be quite lonely as a manager in an organization or as a team leader. And actually, what AI won't do is replace that friend that you have a conversation with over the water fountain and bounce a few ideas off.
I mean, it's even gone as far as, right, like outside of boardrooms and structured environments or even small SMEs, there's been multiple cases of AI giving the wrong advice, right? So it's far too early for that. But it's also, it's very complex. Like the rules of engagement have changed as well over the last 10 years of how do you deal with emotional topics, how do you deal with business topics, how do you deal with relationship management, the number of interventions, whether that's from a HR perspective or a tech perspective or an operational, whatever functional perspective. There's a lot of complexity and a lot of need to slow down and understand the business issue or the people-related issue that you're having. I think where we've ended up as a society is that's bettered us, but it has made things inherently more complex. And that's where I think AI can help. It can help in breaking down what that complexity means, but it will not take the action, and it shouldn't be taking the actions. Once it's taking the actions, then we have to ask ourselves, are we deploying it in the right way? And that goes right back to where we began, right? Which is, what is it fit for use for?
It's interesting. As you're talking there, it got me thinking about just a personal experience, personal life experience, just an observation, really. So when I started my career in the steel industry as a manager 30 odd years ago, there was no email. We still had a post room. We still had, it was typically it would be an operator who had been injured in the steelworks, and to keep him employed, you would give him the job of postman, and he would take the mail, you would write a memo, you would give that memo to the post boy. Unfair, because a lot of these guys were much older than that, and they would walk around the factory delivering the post, And then while I'm there, a computer arrives in the department, and that's quite exciting. And then suddenly there's an email internal, and we can communicate and we can send memos. And now we send thousands of emails, millions of emails come out of our machines all the time, don't we? And we hit that send all button and we send that memo to, thousands of people simultaneously. And I just wonder, is there something afoot? Just like there was that kind of communication change where we went from, I only need to send a memo, and now I'm sending an email to 1,000 people. And I'm just wondering, when it comes to AI, at the moment, are we still at that stage where I'm just sending a memo? And maybe the next chapter is suddenly I'm sending 1,000 of them. And it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, it was just something that kind of came, as we were talking, I thought, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, man. No, look, I mean, like you said, there's thousands of ways this conversation can go, and we all can wax lyrical on what AI is for us right now, both as individuals and as business owners and working with clients and things like that. But I mean, look, ultimately, I think AI is a tool, but it doesn't have experience, it doesn't have judgment, it doesn't know what it means to have a relationship with another human being or several human beings. It can make things up, it can hallucinate, it doesn't have absolute discernment. And ultimately, even if we're using AI as a tool, as we said at the beginning, even with the stuff that it's outputting, you only know it's good if the person checking it knows what's good. And I think that's really ultimately why you still need advisors, you need experts, subject matter experts. And I think that's the reason for being why we're together and we have this partnership, especially in this sort of very sort of converging time, both in sort of the world and in industry. Any sort of parting thoughts? Are we good to round off and close this episode?
I think, look, probably a couple of points from me, right? So one, just recognizing the use of AI is different for everyone. In the advisory world, I think it's an emerging tool that will get infinitely more powerful. And I think we should probably pick up this topic again in 18 months and see where we are. There you go. There's a bit for the content schedule. So.
Absolutely. And just to kind of echo that message again, that actually take the long view and see how technology, this isn't a fad, it's not fashion, it's not going to go away, it's only going to go in one direction. And we got to all try and be on that wave somehow. We've all got to try and be part of it in some way, shape or form. As advisors, we've got to shift our game. Maybe it's less about being that technical expert and more about being that critical friend.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Steve. That's a great place to end on. So from myself, Meehir, Steve and Avneet, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. And Carl.
Brilliant. That went very well, Ken. It really did. It went so quick as well.
That one went very quick, yeah. Because I glanced at my watch at one point.